This is Rebuild to Win, Voices from the Grassroots, hosted by Yusef, Bunchy, Shakur, Kwasi, Akwamu, and Tawana, Honeycomb. Brought to you by the Detroit is Different Podcast Network.
I just want to tell the whole world about my life.
All right, we live, huh?
Live in action, good brother.
All right, here from the Detroit is Different studio. Rebuild to Win, Voices from the Grassroots. We done brought the gang back together.
They say gang.
That is it. Welcome to this first inaugural episode of Rebuild to Win, Voices from the Grassroots. Allowed Tawana, Honeycomb, Patty, and my brother Yusef, Bunchy, Shakur to drag me into this. But I'm here, and I'm excited.
He was fighting, kicking.
Oh man, but I'm here and I'm excited about it. The longer it took to get here, the more excited I became. So I look forward to having this dialogue with them, and hopefully in exchange with you all out there in the listening audience, and that we can build together.
Hey, you said brought the gang back together. What's meant by that?
Oh man, you know what that means, but they don't.
Right.
But then again, a lot of people do. People remember the Urban Network over there on Grand River McGraw.
In Zone 8?
Yeah, y'all know McGraw Avenue, right? Y'all be talking about that on the
Right.
internet. Yeah, we was on Grand River and McGraw. The Urban Network was there it was open from, when did it open? 2007, 2008?
About 2009.
No, it was before. Was it during or before the book? It was Urban Guerrilla Entertainment.
It was after the book.
It was after the book.
It was after the book.
Okay, so and then it closed in 2012.
Yeah. So we had like almost a 4 or 5 year run.
Yeah. So it was a bookstore, cyber cafe. Eventually became. We built out a restaurant. We had a number of important community events there.
Poetry night.
I'm about to say that.
Yeah, one notable.
We had Gorilla Night.
Yeah.
Hosted by the one and only Honeycomb.
Yes, yes indeed. So yeah, this is the gang, y'all. It's been a while since we've all been back on the same platform, and we was doing good things then. We're doing good things now. Everybody moving in different but similar direction. Towards liberation, towards a higher level of human life for ourselves and each other.
Right. So who are you?
Oh man, I'm Kwasi Akwamu. I'm the elder of the group.
I'm the Yelder of the group.
So yeah,
I'm the wild card of the group.
Wow, we got these definitions kind of locked down, right?
Right.
But this is a very informal dialogue that we want to have. We want to talk about things that people are not necessarily talking about. We want to push back. We definitely want to expand the way we think about a lot of issues. We're not trying to come in and be overly dogmatic, doctrinaire, but we definitely want to increase our capacity to think through some of these issues that we confront day to day, that we can see beyond today until to see tomorrow, have some vision. And so this conversation is meant to be fruitful. We don't want to be, and that's the reason why they had to get me. I didn't want to be another talking head. There's a lot of people out here talking, and not to diminish some of the conversations that's taking place out there, but it's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion, and I think that we got to be able to cut through this confusion and try to bring some clarity to the issue that our people can kind of. We talk about Black agendas, having an agenda, and I think it's important. We can't have an agenda if we all over the place. Everybody. We're more confused now. I think Brother John said this. One of the things he wrote the other day when he was here.
Barack.
Barack, yes. He noted that this is one of the most confusing periods for our people ever. We are more divided ideologically in terms of our connection to the society, to one another, uh, and we just all over the place. And the thing is, it's okay to have diversity. However, we need unity, and unity is not something that's ready-made. It has to be forged, and we have to have some kind of common agreement somewhere along the way. And hopefully, our conversation builds us towards that.
So real quick, you mentioned Jama Rock. He was part of a program that was presented to Wayne State, Black.
Black liberation, human rights, and
Yeah, I'm talking about
peace.
the Black Study. The Black Study Groups put that on. It was hosted over at the General Baker Institute, along in conjunction with Community Movement Builders and Black Alliance Peace. I just wanted to again put context, dropped it out there as if the audience know. Is there anything else you want to share about yourself before we move on to
Uh,
Adult Tawana, Patty?
I'm a conscious new African. I'm a member of Community Movement Builder Detroit chapter, Malcolm X, Grassroots Movement Detroit chapter, ReBuild Collective. Uh, I'm a member owner of the Detroit People's Food Co-op.
Whoop, whoop.
Uh,
Talk about that.
Proprietor of the shed. Just out here trying to get in where I fit in and play a role wherever I can and support the forward movement of our people.
Hey. Yeah, so I'm Tawana, also known as Honeycomb. I'm a mother, a lifelong Detroiter, being a member of Detroit Digital Justice Coalition. I do a lot of work around data privacy and consent, which we'll get into in later shows. And yeah, I have the same goals as my brothers here. We don't always travel the exact same path, but we do have very similar destinations. And that's the liberation of our people. And so, yeah, I love what Kwasi has talked about thus far, about us having some common ground. But the contradictions that have been heightened is that we're pushing against a monolith in one breath, and then in another breath, we're trying to have a common ground. I think that's where the tension. You hear a lot of times in movements like Black people are not a monolith. Black people are not a monolith. And I know you're gonna challenge me on Blackness and just even that as an identity. Um, but politically, you have us, we're still very new in coming into the political ideology of Blackness. And I think people are still trying to find some pride within that. And that is where our struggle is. It's like people that are so much further advanced and where we should be ideologically, and then you have people who are just coming into pride of being Black, especially when you grow up in a city like Detroit, where it's been a half century of propaganda thought, right? So we've been dehumanized in every narrative way, and so people are finding that pride again, and so a lot of people aren't ready to like let go of like Blackness, but also wanna push against this notion that we all think alike. But there's danger in that too. So, I'm looking forward to deepening the dialogue around that, and what that means and how anti-Blackness plays into that and all the other things I know we'll talk about.
Oh, I'm with it. Let me just do this real quick. Rebuild to Win is part of our show's title. We kind of like put two titles together. However, it's not it's a slogan. It came out. It emerged following what we say is the demise or the dismantling of what was known the first BLM before there was a hashtag. Before it was Black Lives Matter, it was called Black Liberation Movement. And uh, at the height of the Black Liberation Movement, we had there was a phase of armed conflict with settler colonialism. There was forces and part of the Black Liberation Army, to give it a name, they had a slogan called "Build to Win." In the '70s, of course, the Black Liberation Army suffered major casualties, and there was consequences, and there was a lot of room for growth before their launch. However, uh, in looking back at that, one of the comrades that I'll probably be referencing again and again, who's no longer with us, but is also who's part of Black Liberation Army Coordinating Committee, Brother Yakubu, Owusu Yakubu, he did, and looking back and examining this, he had to conclude that our movement, the war continued, the war between us and oppressive forces continued. However, we lost that particular phase of battle. And our struggle, we were watching part of Black Liberation Mondays over at Mama Cool Community House this past Monday. We was watching film. We had a conversation. We were talking about how uh, our struggle, we tend to see the phase or the transition from the afros to the perms,
Right.
from the dashikis to the silk shirts and fly collars. And I mean, it was a very abrupt shift in our consciousness, from a sense of collective struggle towards individualism. Uh, even, I mean, there was whole segments of the so-called militant black struggle that was co-opted through philanthropic forces, notably the Ford Foundation back then, but through poverty programs of the government, which is, we can draw parallels today, and that's a conversation for another day to really unpack.
Privatization of
And but keeping in context like civil rights legislation in 1965 when they got Voters' Right Act, a lot of focus or emphasis was placed on electoral politics. And it was promised there insofar as, they thought that, we put people in office, they might do this, they might protect our rights, they might not leave us out of, whatever. And, we can get police chiefs that won't bust our heads. I mean, there was a lot of promise there that was unfulfilled, but that's a part of that, that was a shift towards the destruction of the Black Liberation Movement, which led to the slogan being changed from "Build to Win" to "Rebuild to Win." Meaning, let's look back, let's reflect on what we went through. Everything wasn't a victory. There was a lot of losses. We can celebrate the victorious aspects of our struggle, but we have to learn from those aspects that, took us a few steps backwards. You know what I'm saying? We still have political prisoners today, prisoners of war that, a lot of us don't even know their names. And
and
that
new
that's
ones every day.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And a new generation that like is anonymous to us because they've been out there from George Floyd, to Michael Brown, all these contemporary protests against police brutality, murder, assassination, terrorism. And so, Rebuild to Win is about us looking into this, examining, and trying to, what I'm saying, get a good footing that we can march forward. That's
Alright.
very important.
I want to say one thing real quick. We're real quick, and we should also see it as a direct contradiction to "Make America Great Again" and "Detroit is Coming Back." I mean, "Rebuild to Win," it should be a challenge to that notion, maybe more systemically. But when I hear "Make America Great Again," I know what they mean, and I know what they're trying to call America to become or to continue to be. And then when I hear Detroit is coming back, I know what they're trying to call Detroit to become or continue to be. And so, when I hear "Rebuild to Win," we're talking about that revolutionary struggle in history. I hear that as our challenge to those types of calls on people, to create this other type of society that's very violent towards us, murderous, terrorist, um,
It has always been that way from the very first day to now.
right.
Has always been that way. Despite some folks, becoming millionaires or in this generation, billionaires within this capitalist framework, uh, we have never had a single day of absolute peace as a collective, as a nation. So, and we had to look at that. We had to examine that. Everybody have a good day. Even in our enslavement, some people managed to have a day where they might have sabotaged something on the plantation and felt that that was a victory, something to feel good about.
So y'all see this gonna be heavy, right? The train went a whole another way. We gotta put it back to but it's good, right? And part of it is rectifying. He didn't mention that word either in our studies of rebuild to win. and part of also rebuild and win is when we talk about COINTELPRO, we always talk about it from the standpoint of J. Edgar Hoover, but not from the position like that's what any seller government does. It creates a program to prevent someone to achieving their liberation. But more importantly, they also key in on the flawedness of a human being, and that's part of the rebuild win was to look at what did we contribute for COINTELPRO, for the Kwasi just laid out, for the Black Liberation Movement to be derailed, to have the demise. So far as part of my introduction, again, what up, though? My name is Yusef Bunchy Shakur. It's part of that transformation and transitioning from a former gang member, prisoner, and what I'm writing and theorizing about what I call Black transformation, and that Black transformation is rooted in the Black experience, Malcolm X, Ella Baker, Stada Shakur, and so many others, right? I think Dr. Bobby Wright said if we're looking for an answer to our problem, it's within our own lived experience. And but because how our lived experience has been shaped and given to us, we don't trust it. And particularly when you think about how academia is and saying, well, that's not tested, that's not empirical, and which is all that bullshit. And we can't continue to use white theory to explain black phenomena. We can't use white theory to explain black phenomena. I think that's where the slogan of Rebuild and Win was about explaining that black phenomena. And I think we're trying to continue that legacy with the birth of the Rebuild to Win from the Grassroots podcast, but also you didn't mention the Rebuild and Win paper. So there's the Rebuild and Win newspaper that we're going to also be talking about some of the articles that comes out quarterly, and just being able to share. Like I didn't want to do this like my other two comrades over here. None of us really want to do it, but and it was a time to do it. Time for everything, man. I think we share a little about us. All we're all native Detroiters of Black Detroit. Me particular, I'm son of Ava Joe. How long we been knowing each other?
Y'all a little longer than me, but it's been at least been about 15
Yeah,
years
it's
now,
Over 10
something like
years.
that. Yeah.
So here's a caveat to me and Kwasi relationship. Like most people know that him and I was in prison. But most people don't know that him and I never did time. We was never on the same prison. Actually, we had a mutual comrade that Kwasi had left a prison that I rode in, and him and his brother, they was organizing together. They was doing some political studying. Actually, at the time, they was starting Black Prison.
it was,
Uh,
it was a Black Panther prisoner party.
yeah. He recruited brother name was Singora, aka Smiley. He recruited me, but actually, and how we met, me and Smiley was over books. Like when I got to that plantation, people knew of me as a guy with books. People knew him as a guy with books, and it's so funny. We meet up like instead of having guns, say who guns the bigger, whatever. We meet up like who library was the dope. And I
We
can
still
right exactly. I can admit at the time, he had me, right? 'Cause I had more religious, more contemporary type. He had that revolutionary. I mean, at the time, that's what Caesar Time was coming out, Blood in My Eye, or they was reissuing those books. And
Black Classic Press was putting them back out.
exactly, and I'm like, oh shit, I need that in my life. That's a little caveat most people don't know about Quasi and I. So we never officially met until we came home out of prison. Tawana and I, we met at Hill Detroit.
okay. So what year was that?
Shit.
Oh, that's 13, about 13 years, 'cause I
Yeah.
think that was
Oh,
2010.
that was
That was
the march.
2010.
That was the
Yeah, no, yeah,
grassroots march
yeah.
against violence.
Yeah. From the east to the west.
Caveat, Tawana ended up being my opening act before I came and spoke. She came and gave a dope ass program and stuff. Quasi around somewhere taking pictures.
Yeah,
That day.
probably so.
Yeah.
But the most important part about that event was the west side marched to the east side,
Right.
and we all met up somewhere in the middle. It was powerful. It was a powerful experience.
No, that was
Yeah.
met up at Palmer Park right there at the mid juncture from the east side to west side.
Yeah.
No, it was beautiful.
I want to say one thing about that experience. What was powerful. You identify yourself as elder. There was the elder Ron Scott.
Yes,
Who's no longer
yes,
with. He
yeah.
was very instrumental when we think about elders, people who not just elders, right? Folks who have put in the movement,
Right.
who've been there, done that, but not necessarily trying to use their prestige for manipulation purpose, trying to hold themselves as
Right.
gatekeepers and shit like that, right? He'll get in the trenches with you, he'll argue with you, whatever it took.
But he also
Me
gave
too.
you good
Mhm.
instruction, good advice based
Yeah,
on his own experience over the previous decade
absolutely.
of struggle
Right.
he was
You could
involved in.
see him in Detroit Black Journal,
Mhm.
Eyes on the Prize, of course, Detroit Coalition Against Police
Exactly.
Brutality, like such a long story
He's a Detroit
history.
Panther. When the
Yes,
Panthers
Detroit
were
Panther,
the Black
right.
Panther Party, he was a Black Panther. So he had a long history, and he definitely was an elder in the struggle and in terms of trying to shape some of the younger folks who was coming along and trying to, play a good role as an elder is supposed to play, and not like I say, being just caught up on his own position as having experience. And it's a lot of ego
Yeah, yeah.
in the movement, and there's a lot of people that don't want to,
Pimping.
get. It's rough. It's
Hey,
rough.
so I got a quick question before we transition to
I'm
our
still introducing because I
yeah,
gotta have
yeah.
introductions.
So yeah, no doubt. Share Ron Scott's story.
Mm.
I go first. I had a flyer out. It was my documentary, the first one of my first mini documentaries that I was in my book, and we was at over there. What's that place over off 75? Clay, 75 and Clay.
Russell,
Yeah, the Russell.
Industrial Center.
Yeah, it was a meeting in there, right? And Ron walked in. And at the time we had met. He looking at the flyer, and I think you trying to promote yourself. I'm trying to get out there. I use this certain language. He's like, "Who is this guy? Think he know everything?" Some Ron said. And I'm like, "I'm that guy."
Of course you did.
Yeah, he was a high head. Like, don't dim my light.
Right. Like, damn, bro, for real. Like, we end up, man. Ron ended up being. I told him he's like a father, but those things happen, right? And I think that's part of the rebuild and win. Like, it's not always going to be peaches and cream. You're
Right.
From
gonna,
one generation to the
right?
next. And we had to build those links. Otherwise, each generation is start from scratch. They start with no experience, and therefore, the cycle continues to repeat itself and not advance itself. And that's where we have to break that cycle of going in circles. We continue to repeat history largely because we don't know history, or we not attentive to the lessons that are offered in history. And I think we lack that, and we living in a very one of the I say contributors to the confusion today is that we have more information at our disposal today, than ever before with just the internet. And yeah, I mean, books. If you can't afford books, you can find a PDF. I find PDF copies of a little bit of everything on the internet. But we prefer the sound bites. Like I say, that's one of the reasons I didn't want to be a talking head because I mean it's easy to to be driving down and listening to someone talking. And it can be some good information, but it can still be inadequate, very inadequate to a fuller understanding. And we often don't take the next steps to kind of fully develop the position before we ourselves begin to advocate these positions. We don't understand, the pros and the cons of this, that, or the other. And we hurt ourselves in that way. It's a harm to us to launch something with, you know, inaccurate information. And I'm with Miles. No investigation, no right to speak. And so I think it's important that we do try to sort through things. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting for this show is that each episode we would introduce, a book. Introduce a book. I mean, it can be from whatever vantage point you think is relevant. We introduce a book just briefly to the audience, something that influenced you, something that had critical information, something that relates to maybe further understanding a current issue. I think it's important because readers make leaders. I do think so. The more we know, the more prepared we are because we can't solve a problem that we don't understand. And I'm very clear on that. Can't solve no problem you can't understand.
All right. With that being said, Tawana, you want to share your book that you brought?
Before sharing the book, I like to you all drop some jewels, right? Um, Kwasi talked about no investigation, no right to speak, and earlier you talked about COINTELPRO. And I think one of the challenges that I find in, and I say movement in quotes because I think sometimes movement gets conflated with like mechanisms for moving forward or moments, historical moments. But um, but a lot of people don't even know. A lot of people centers like the surveillance of our movement and the targeting of our movement on COINTELPRO. They don't think about the Bureau of Investigations. They don't think about like pre-COINTELPRO. They don't think about how some of the same agents were leveraged against Garvey and the Panther Party. And so, you know, I find myself a lot of times because of those sound bites, I find myself a lot of times listening to um, talking heads and not being able to get even very meaningful dialogue and conversation from what's being said because I can tell it's very surface. And so that I'm really deeply grateful that we have decided that this was going to be a podcast that's going to be rooted in study and rooted in educating and pushing back against those conflations between schooling and education. We're all very well educated. I'm not very schooled, right? So I do a whole lot of studying
Self-study,
that's outside of
autodidact.
academia. Exactly. Exactly. And another thing that we talked about that I'm really excited about is thinking about like the etymology of words, like how they came into being, how we started to build and use certain language and what language we should be pushing back against. And so I'm just really excited to be in this space with y'all. I've always been challenged politically and intellectually when being in space with you all. So I'm like really deeply grateful to be back in this political struggle um, with y'all. So the
Right
book
on.
that the book that I decided for today that I was going to lift up is Detroit I Do Mind Dying, Study of Urban Revolution.
Just bought
Um,
a show. Right, do my time.
That would have been that's
you know,
nice.
and you know, a little humble brag, I got a lot of signatures in this book, you know, like Mike
Man,
Hamblin
America's
and
gonna come like
Angela
that.
Davis,
Uh,
and you know, a few other folks are in here, authors of the book. Um, but
you
I
get
think
general?
this I didn't. He passed away before I got the book. But but I will say this.
Sorry, I said General Baker. So already.
Yes, yes. I was gonna say, you know,
Okay.
mention him in reference to this book. But the reason why I want to lift this book up is not only because we're seeing a lot of worker movements like reemerge in this moment, like you're seeing like Amazon workers, fight for 15, tech workers, a lot of workers like that movement within the working class is reemerging. But this book really did a lot for me within like taking myself out of the job system, making me think about the job system as connected to my humanity. And so, out of many books that I've read over time, Detroit I Do Mind Dying really did center my humanity for me in a way that other books had not. And so I think this is a very important book to study. If you're in you're working class, or you're in any sort of mindset where you want to push against the status quo, or you're challenging capitalism or anything, this is a really rooted Detroit story, and it really does teach you that everybody within the capitalistic system is deemed replaceable. And so if you detach your humanity from these job systems, these academic systems, and all these systems that are trying to define your humanity, you can have more of a systemic impact in movement or those movement moments that we find ourselves engaged in. So it's a very important book. It's very Detroit centered. You learn a lot about General Baker and other revolutionary
Cool
organizers.
taco.
Right,
Yeah.
but you know, at the core of it, we talking about it's about the Black labor movement. We're talking
Yeah,
about the League of Revolutionary Black Workers.
League of
yeah.
Black Revolution.
You know,
Drum and all
which
the
is a
other
MABR. Yes, all the
ums.
organizations that led a drum, L,
El
Rum,
Rum, yeah,
all of
yep,
the predecessors and before it became the League. You know, all these the black workers, the hardest, you know, the ones who what they say, the last hired, first fired, worked in the foundries,
dragged
the
off the
dirtiest
line and
jobs,
yep,
dangerous jobs, never could be promoted. And the labor movement in general. was very discriminatory.
Still is.
Right. It remains, except, it's the major shift is a lot of the unions are working hand in hand with the corporations they supposed to be unions against.
UAW was "You ain't white" back then.
No, this
That's what they would call it. The
yeah,
organizers would say.
General Motors financed one of the big strikes in the 70s. I mean, like literally financed this. I mean, it's all for show, but it began in earnest among the workers who did. So this is a book about the working class struggle as it emerged in Detroit through the auto industries and related industries. So
But
it's
I really
definitely
want the new industries, the new organized, the new energized young people to see this as something to stand on the
absolutely
stand on the
no doubt,
shoulders of this organizing.
no doubt. 'Cause they was on the cutting edge. This wasn't just some Detroit. They was on the cutting edge. So now, let me get back to this introduction because he started something, but and I want to complete it because you're right. Me and Yusef, we started our journey behind enemy lines, behind bars and barbed wire. I didn't Yusef. I started. I mean, I knew Yusef father before Yusef was in prison.
Mm.
Yusef. One of the unique things about Yusef's story, when people first, like read his first book, is the thing that most people are struck by is that he developed his first relationship with his father behind bars. I,
Right.
I knew his father before I knew him, so he was considered like a little brother to me because I had a lot of respect for his father and still do. And his father is still incarcerated. I would like to say a politicized prisoner, but it's definitely political insofar as the situation. I'm sure one day we might be able to devote an episode discussing that brother, Jamo Baruti. Uh, but I knew his father, and so, like I said, the relationship is we began to create a inner prison uh, organizations. It began with this thing. I was very young in my consciousness. I was very just trying to, like I say, jumping on things before I really understood it. I read about the Black Panther. I was incorporated through Africa before I actually had my first literature on the Africa. I literally was using the word based on something that resonated with me in a footnote in a law book. Do you hear me now? A lot of people know about George Jackson, know about Malcolm X as very influential uh, people from behind the prison. There's another brother that came out of New York. I used to look for his lawsuit. His name was Martin Salisbury. Uh, oh man, this brother was started him out in the 50s, and he was a paralegal, and he was suing in prisons for all kind of things. But he was a Puerto Rican out of New York, so but he knew Arabic, Spanish, and English, and so he had in the New York prisons organization connected to the Nation of Islam, independent Nation of Islam. It was called the Muslim Brotherhood, and I remember reading in a footnote they had like excerpts from this lawsuit, excerpts from these documents that was seized. It was a secret organization. This in the 50s, you know.
At the prison, but
It was
that's
in the prisons. It was an underground kind of because they didn't have the right of that kind of religion in there. But he fought for that and then eventually getting it. But in a later lawsuit, after he got out and went to Rochester, New York, and they railroaded him back to prison during the time when you had these urban rebellions in uh, Buffalo, New York, I believe it was. And he had a bookstore. He got out and opened up a bookstore. He was an anarchist.
hold on. You basically saying he got targeted.
Yes. Yep.
So
Yep.
he got
With that little,
targeted, and we
like
talking.
that store with the little red things,
Yeah,
and then it's in the middle.
he got
Yep.
targeted. So this is what we talking about. He became a political prisoner.
Yes,
Pretty much.
yes, yes. He was a politicized prisoner the first time, and he was a political prisoner the second time because they literally was trying to frame him and say he was selling dope out of his bookstore at the height of an urban
When you say that,
rebellion.
you talking about the police or police and stuff.
The powers that was the state, yes, the state
And
in all its manifestations.
and politicized prisoner, that's someone who goes into prison and becomes politicized versus someone who
Yes,
is incarcerated because of their political identity.
correct, correct. So
And then,
thank you for inserting. I mean,
no, yeah,
this is what we want to do is
Yeah.
really bring
yeah.
flesh these terms out that they don't, get misused or misunderstood, that it makes sense.
And then hold on, so then to Lana's point, they was surveillancing him.
Yeah, he was under surveillance. Our people been under surveillance since we've been here.
That's our whole next episode.
And that's one thing. That's why it's so important that we kind of in on the surveillance. And we will do that, again and again throughout these programs. Is talk about it because we've constantly been on surveillance, and in response to that, we need to develop what Brother IQ's referred to as lines of secure communications.
Right.
Can you repeat it for our audience? You said a brother, when he got out, he opened up a bookstore.
Yes.
A bookstore.
Yes, he did.
He didn't have guns.
No, he
He wasn't on street corners yelling. He opened up a bookstore in the community.
He was organizing people who wanted to be, who really wanted to understand the problem. Like I say, you can jump out there, both hands and feet, and just be angry. Franz Fanon and many others have said that anger and rage alone cannot sustain a movement.
We call them demagogues.
You know what I'm saying? The emotions can't carry us forward. You know what I'm saying? We need rational thought. We need to be able to think through and, like Tupac say, plot, plan, and strategize. And so
yeah, there's a Tupac quote. Oh man. We know we fine today.
Well, we know that's what makes us most dangerous. So we'll come to that one accord and that political ideology. That's what becomes the weapon.
Yes.
I mean, and I just want to, we're kind of breaking this down as you're talking, because we underestimate, as whatever you call yourself, as activist, organizer, as an advocate, you still can be targeted. You still can be surveillance. And sometimes we wonder, well, why me?
There's no innocent activity.
Absolutely.
Under the state, George Jackson, talked about it, but there is no innocent activity. And so that brothers, he was using. He talked about how the police were raiding all these different Panther offices and headquarters and raiding them, and he used the analogy with the Vietnamese. And he talked about how you wouldn't have found they couldn't have found where they was at in the first place, and that we make it easy for them to destroy us. We make it easy for them. That was where George Jackson word. We make it easy for them to destroy us, and our job is to make it hard. Our job is to make it hard for them to destroy us. And we have to be clear on that. That means we have to have a greater or deeper understanding. There are no sacred cows on this show.
Right.
There are no sacred cows.
What's on your shirt?
I got 3 land-based revolutionaries, theoreticians and thinkers.
Move your what's name, Kwasi?
My microphone.
Yeah, it's good now.
But we had 3 people that have been very influential in my life. At the top is Mario Bedelli, formerly known as Richard Henry. Below we have Harry Haywood. Harry Haywood over here. I know his name is not very familiar because he's been literally whitewashed out of history by our people. We'll talk about that in another episode. We don't have a lot of time here. And one of my theoretical teachers, Brother Owusu Yaki Yakubu, who was also, I referred to him earlier, who was a young man who went into prison as part of the Black Liberation Army out of Chicago, out of Illinois. Did 33 years before he was released, but he did his time pretty quietly and intellectually, insofar as he organized, in many ways, a brilliant brother, great thinker, and he poked at my own knowledge. The more I read him before I met him, you know what I'm saying? He poked at poked holes because he was a thinker. And he was the first one to say that we had to critique our own struggle. Like, we made it easy for COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO couldn't have did what it did without our aid and assistance, without our neglect in some area, in some shape, form, or fashion. We contributed to the attacks that happened. We made it easy for that to happen. And so, but all of these, you know what I'm saying? No one is above. I love Imari. Imari is one of the seminal thinkers behind Provisional Government of the Republic of North Africa. Nation Day is coming up March 31st, April 2nd, Charleston, South Carolina. See you there. Uh,
Slick commercial.
Let's say the shameless plug.
but Amari, I don't agree with everything no one says, and that applies to us as well. Nothing we say is gospel, but I'm saying that's why learning how to think. What Malcolm was always talking about, learning how to think and not what to think.
Right.
And oftentimes we find ourselves regurgitating things that other people said without even unpacking it for its fuller meaning.
Romanticize.
And it really it halts our struggle from moving. Sometimes it stagnates us. Sometimes it sends us backwards. It sends us backwards. And we try to, Kwame and Nkrumah say forward ever, backwards never.
How does that tie into the book that you brought?
Oh, well, I brought a book, International Human Rights, the International Bill of Human Rights, which is a document I had since I was incarcerated.
It looked like it been through the washing machine.
No, you know what? I was at
Tell it's been read.
Right.
I was at IMAX Correctional Facilities, level 6 Supermax here in Michigan for a couple of years.
Let's clarify that. How long ago was it since you was at IMAX?
That was in 1991, 92, 93, 92.
So that's over 20 years.
Yes, well over. Yes, it's long.
So you've had that particular book.
Yes, but it's one of the things they did. They took staples out of everything. So when they got your book, they took your staples out. So I had to use thread from my prison blues and kind of sew it back together through the holes to bind the book. So
Kwasi is the elder. I think I was a freshman in high school.
I mean, prison that you went through after leaving IMAX. Again, I'm just trying to put it in context for people.
How you carried that book,
right? Because we say 20 years and we rush in like, wow, that's heavy.
Don't get me wrong. I haven't pulled this. It'll probably be more damaged. I hadn't pulled it out in a long time. But and the reason I brought it is because it highlights some of the things that we also going to be talking about. Like I said, this is the introductory episode, so we just kind of setting the tone. But in international law, which to me supersedes domestic settler colonial law, it's a lot of pushback and critique, and it's justified against the United Nations. But most human rights law, as we understand it today, we had to keep it in context. It was happening at a time of a global upheaval from colonial countries.
Liberation struggle.
Yeah, liberation struggles from South America, Asia, Africa. These struggles, some of these newly emerging nations from colonialism, were the countries that were shaping human rights law in those early days, and we had to keep that in context. Now, what makes the United Nations compromise is the overwhelming force of United States imperialism in determining how these other countries vote, because though they decolonized, they became neo-colonized.
So you're saying at that level, there's two competing ideologies.
Well, they suppressed. The United States didn't sign, for instance, and it's not in here, the Genocide Convention from 1948, which was one of the first human rights statements to come out. It came out in 1848, Genocide Convention, which articulates what genocide is. And if you read the definition, it articulates everything that's happening to us to this very day. Outside, it's not just physical murder of a people, it's a bunch of other qualifications that constitute genocide. And the United States did not sign the Genocide Act for 40 years, in 1988. And even then, and that was around the time that they were beginning to issue what a lot of people refer to as reparations to, like the Japanese that were interned in detention camps during World War II. At the time when some of the indigenous nations were being, thrown a bone, after taking the land from sea from one side to the other, Atlantic to the Pacific.
So let's use the contemporary where folks can really get what you're talking about. When we was just recently at the Mama Cool House, I played the episode of Bunchy with Malcolm. He's over in Egypt somewhere right now.
Yeah, he was over at the supposed to be an organization, African Unity.
So can you tie that in? Because I know everybody's watching Bunchy, watching that.
Godfather,
right, and how they reenacted Shay, and how Shay tells them,
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
not
not historically
right,
accurate
right,
because
and not necessarily critiquing that or trying to make, but tying that in because remember Malcolm's he introduces the
with human rights.
human rights. So yeah,
Yeah, Malcolm stopped hard for human rights over civil rights, and the civil rights struggle led to domestic legislation, right for the housing, against housing discrimination, for voting rights. But that was within and under the context of the United States Settler Constitution. However, human rights, and the context I think you asked for, maybe I'm wrong, is outside countries can't intervene on
right,
domestic
right.
problems. So long as Martin Luther King was being dog sicked on them and police batons cracking heads, they're marching for basic civil rights, to participate in so-called the American dream, as they were framing it. Malcolm understood that you can't even ask for help because it doesn't, it's not you're not raising it to the level of human rights violations. Human rights violation was where you took people to the world court. You know what I'm saying? And you have other countries weigh in on these issues.
It superseded American government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it troubling that we get stuck within domestic law about what's legal and what's illegal when the United States legalized our slavery. And if they decide to legalize again, if we going
Well, it's
by
still legal on the books in most of our states.
Neither slavery nor involuntary
Right.
servitude shall exist except as a punishment for a crime. 13th Amendment.
Yeah.
yes, and
Including Michigan. It's still
I mean, but we get caught up on domestic law, and not to say that we can't push back against
right.
oppressive and repressive domestic law, but that has to be tactical steps and not necessarily our end game.
Yeah.
That can't be our
That's
goal.
just to slow some of the hemorrhaging down.
Because I mean, if we just go back to the indigenous struggle about signing treaties and putting anything on paper, it's just a piece of paper at the end of the day. It doesn't mean anything. There's no one to watch and monitor and make sure they holding it down and doing what they're supposed to do. And like I say, all that stuff don't mean nothing. I mean, people was complaining when say the Asian they did the anti-hate thing about the Asians, and it's
Right.
like we supposed to get our bill. Like your bill is your bill, and in any case, what they gonna write on a piece of paper that's gonna make a significant difference? Because none of it has. None of it has in history, and so we get excited about stuff written down on paper when I believe it was Red Cloud that said, how many treaties have we broke with the United States? None. How many have they broke? All of them. They haven't not a single treaty that they honor, and likewise with us. And we have to be honest with that. We can't get caught up in what's in uh, domestic law because our liberation will not come through legislative means. There will not be a vote in Congress on whether the black nation fulfills its promise. So we have to be clear on that. That don't mean we don't push and struggle within these realms, but these are not.
To understand that's the means.
Yes. I mean, it's and then also what we used to say back in the day. We some of these struggles we engage in to as a way of educating our people that we should say exhaust our remedies.
Right.
We push it as far as we can go, but then we have to learn the lessons from that. You know what I'm saying? It can't go past here. Then what does that say? That can't. And Malcolm used to say, you know what I'm saying? You can't claim you want freedom in one breath and the next breath talking about what you want to do to get it. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't want to talk your head off.
It made me think of Ron Scott again real quick because you asked really briefly for like a Ron Scott
Mhm.
story. And it makes me think about
Yeah,
like
I
Ron
thought
would drag me to
I
like
forgot my question, man. Thank you, bro. Glad you brought it back.
Ron would drag me to like the board of police commission meetings, right? And I mean, the civilian oversight body is not a legitimate governance of law enforcement. However, I knew that I learned through him that that's a space to educate and politicize our people about what
Hiding
we
the
think.
contradiction.
Right, exactly. So you had a lot of elders, particularly like the large voting base, they religiously go to those meetings and they're hearing one side of the story. They're hearing propaganda. So if they're hearing propaganda, then what is our intervention in that if we're not in those spaces to give what our ideology is? So yeah, so it makes me think about that, like, you know, sometimes voting, or other things that are put on paper or op-eds or podcasts or any mechanism of sharing a narrative is leveraged as an intervention to the dominant narrative that has put us in the position that we're in. And so I just want to bring that up. I used to go kicking and screaming to those meetings with Ron Scott, like, why I want to go to those meetings.
Long, boring.
Yeah, like who wants to go there? You know, and
Right.
now I understand why
Surrounded by the
he's
police.
yeah,
And go on the record that it's another view.
right.
Go on record that it's another view, because they can always argue, and they always argue that what we hear is that people want more police.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't hear that some people saying the opposite.
Or sometimes people who want more is because they haven't heard our alternative vision.
I think that's a great point when you illustrate about Ron, right? And Ron taught me that every revolutionary is an activist, organizer, advocate. Not every activist, organizer, and advocate is a revolutionary. And the point being, a revolutionary is one who has a commitment to an ideology, commitment to a certain lifestyle. But
What is an ideology, though?
ideology is rooted in a theory, rooted in a particular belief.
It's a set of ideas,
Yeah.
and we all governed by ideas. We we don't always consciously know what the ideology is, but when you say I want to be a boss, I want to be a CEO, that's the ideology attached to
Absolutely.
those concepts.
Right.
Absolutely.
When you say
Sometimes it's just an agenda and a goal, and you don't even notice.
right,
Like you said,
you're fulfilling an ideology that you don't even understand.
And which makes
It-
you more dangerous.
Yes, it's more dangerous to you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we can grow into ideology. We can start out not knowing and then grow into it and claim it and own it and become advocates for it. But we all are possessed by certain sets of ideas. Some of those ideas may have come through our upbringing, whether it be the church. The ideas could be what we learned in school. It can come through our experience or conversations with folks. But there are ideas, that a governing set of ideas. They're not always political, but they are political because nothing is not political.
right.
And politics, and I just use a simplified version from Dr. Malana Karenga. I know he get a bad rap for a lot of some of his history, but he's a brilliant thinker. I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I thought it was very useful because it helped me through the years. He defined politics as the art and process of gaining, maintaining, and using power. You know, that's the essence of politics, and power is the end game. It's always the end game, and how do you use that?
And
You
let's
know,
be real, if we use the concepts every day, we create a better society. Like
Well,
just the way we
separate the message
engage
from the
with one
messenger
each other,
sometimes is the
right.
best way. I
So
mean,
so you say it can create a better society. Are we trying? Is that the goal? Create a better society? A society that creates something out of the abolishment of the society.
I
Well, I
follow.
don't know if I want to abolish society.
No, this.
Society
So
doesn't
what's
have
all
one
right? So
definition.
okay, so let's define what you mean by society.
Right. I mean, I think it's similar to community, right? It's
Society comes
defined by the people who are part of it.
For the dictionary,
now, and I'm one.
the pocket dictionary.
Society is a very basic term, man.
Yeah,
Society is.
it-
I mean, but
I just wanted to do
I would argue for liberating our society, New African society, from American settler society. However, we're talking about building a model society, a new society, a society that fulfills all those aspirations that we sing about, those high and lofty ideas
So no, so
about how we can get along and do things together. You know,
so for clarity purpose, when the word society is being used, it's not talking about the common present day society, but the transformation of society out of our experience for our liberation. Is that what I
We're
mean?
defining a society that serves us.
Yeah, right, but not. So when I thought like something like man, our government, our president, I thought that's what
No,
you.
government, that's a whole different. I don't know about it's not the same.
Somebody phone?
you're leaning on the light.
Okay.
But now, that's important because vision. One thing we wanna hope to transmit through this program is a little vision that we can see past the present. Because as the old folks used to say, this too shall pass, but it ain't gonna pass on its own.
Right.
And what is it gonna pass to?
Right, and
What's
right,
next?
right, 'cause, it continues to transition, society continues to
Mhm.
transition, we change, we are shifting, like, I often say that we have a generation now that was born with the internet and iPhone.
Right.
They were born with
Smartphone.
technology is part of their, DNA, 'cause
Mhm.
it was here already, I was here when it wasn't, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So I remember the way the world functioned, and some of us are more accepting of this technology unquestionably, and
And
so
technology has been conflated to just mean digital technology because people have come up in that society where they hear that technology is this, technology is
yes,
books,
No,
technology
that's
is,
her field here,
you
but
know.
she stood,
and
But
and
I'm
I
she
just
and
stood
I'm
saying,
up on that
it's
one.
and I'm here to learn, and I'm here to learn,
I love it, love it.
oh, Bunchy, what's your book?
My book is The Genocide Files. Where am I? Right, damn.
You said that kind of joyfully.
I did. Cause I don't read a lot of novels.
see, you got the flag, this ain't colored in, but
Yeah, I repeat, I don't read a lot of novels. I probably can count on one hand and a half how many novels I read in my life.
same here.
I don't even remember how I came across this book. And when a matter of fact, I
What's
do.
the subtitle on that?
The Genocide Files, a novel of suspense.
Mm.
Matter of fact, Robert Boxer.
Okay,
I can't think of his other name, but
boy,
anyway,
Rico,
Rico.
Rico X.
He gave Rico X. He gave me this book, man, and it's like the spook was set by the dope 2.0,
Mm.
and
Is it fiction? No.
it's not nonfiction. It's
Mm.
nonfiction, but
It's fiction.
it's fiction.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah, it's fiction. But it tells like I really I hate the word story, but it tells a story where it uses this character of his brother who works. He's a part owner in a newspaper company, and the
Mm.
newspaper company is struggling. And so he decides, like, well, the way I'm going to save it, I'm gonna get on the ground, or that Republican mentality, and put myself up in the bootstraps to get out of figure out because he's getting all the pressure because he's the minority in this situation, and as a result, he finds himself in this conflict of some police, and so he begins to do investigating reporting, and investigating reporting takes him on this whirlwind where he learns stuff about his family that he was that had been held from it. But during this process, it really walks you through transformation.
Mm.
He starts off as this petty bourgeois brother, looks down on the Negroes in the ghetto, and by the time you get to the end of the book, he learns that his so the Genocide Files, it talks about how the government had this plan, this plot, how to destroy and kill black people. And his father was at the center of trying to solve this problem, but he didn't know this. And then his brother, I mean, his father's brother was like a guerrilla and whatnot. So at the end, he starts off as this very petty bourgeois. He's a revolutionary.
Wow.
Very, very powerful, very entertaining, very engaging. And then like the stuff that you and I we all talk about, and we try to explain to people. I ain't trying to hear that black shit, or I ain't man going somewhere.
He was one of them.
Right, exactly.
He was one of them.
And by the end of the book, he's the one. He's on the opposite end, and that's why I really when you said that joy, the excitement of that, because we talk about what people you want to show is who are our audience. You
Right.
know, our audience is our people, and our people could be a multitude of folks. But how do we
Fighting
talk
the
to
contradiction, phrase
and talk to them in a manner where we ain't talking over their head? Again, we talk like
the
as we've been demonstrating. We gonna say a word. We about to break this word down. We just ain't about to drop some shit on you and keep it moving. And it's just a talking head shit.
That's what's up.
loving it.
That's what's up. We're gonna deal with nomenclature too. We're gonna deal with terminology. All language isn't equal, and nomenclature is,
Our study is not equal either.
yeah, it's not. No, we got comments.
Yes, yes.
How do
We
we
just been chatting. What's
how,
going
how
on?
do we access those comments? This is new. We just getting acclimated to this. Detroit is different. It's very high tech, and so they're doing
Man,
more than I'm prepared for.
let's give a shout out to Joe Black and Kari.
Woo-hoo!
Kari Frazier,
Yeah,
Joe Black.
Yes, thank you.
happening. Congratulations on the start, man. Happy, excited.
We happy to be here.
Yes, we are.
I want to say real quick while we doing that, Kwasi talking about nomenclature. It's really important. Ah, okay. I just want to say it's really important we live in a society where, like, billionaire Dan Gilbert has bought, like, dictionary.com and thesaurus.com. So we
That's
can't and thinking about digital technologies and right, we're gonna get to a point, and you're looking at ChatGPT and all these other technologies that we can have more deeper depth in a future show, but we're getting to the point where reality cannot just be taken for granted, right? The definitions of words will change, the ways that words are articulated online will be changed, and new generations will come into a different sort of consciousness based on who is at the helm of owning these words, and so it's just really, really important that we keep that in mind.
'cause, yeah, because words. A professor in Google Thiago said that language is a carrier of culture,
Mhm.
and not culture in the sense of artifacts, not the dashiki and the dreadlock per
How
se,
we be it's a way
but
of being.
culture, right? Culture is the value systems, the mores, the everything that governs a society,
Mhm.
a people, a community, a village, and uh, language being a carrier of culture is very influential. The terms that are used to describe phenomena, like you say, they had a civil rights struggle. Malcolm X introduced human rights to that narrative.
And he shift.
Yes, that was a major shift. It was a mind opening shift to another way of interpreting or understanding our reality, which is very important.
Right,
But we're gonna also introduce terminology and nomenclature
right.
that is particularly designed to help advance our struggle. One of the things I did not particularly or explicitly mention about myself is that I am a conscious New African. Uh, conscious New African.
Darren Mack says,
That is
"Free the
just a
land."
now conscious New African is a term that just happened to be used in the Code of Umoja, which is the Constitution of the Republic of New Africa. And conscious New African means that I am aware and accept or embrace my New Africanness, as opposed, we say that all descendants of those who were enslaved are New Africans. Just some are not aware of their New
Right.
Africanness. And therefore, when I say kind of New African, just saying that I accept and embrace that I am a part of a nation that evolved right here
Okay, he fine.
inside the belly of the beast.
Uh,
You know, so nomenclature is important, and I refer to, I don't do it as often because sometimes it could confuse people. And one thing,
I ain't never heard of the word today. So
what word is that?
honestly,
Well, nomenclature is just
just
that's
the
an English
how
term, just
words come
how
into being.
you name things
Mhm.
to give it meaning.
Names.
And but
Like the etymology of the word, like what's the root? How did the word develop?
or how it how it is used, like historically. They refer,
Mhm.
like, we in Detroit, all three of us. Don't you got family that your family didn't start in Detroit.
right.
Right.
Your family didn't start in Detroit. Our family didn't start in Detroit. We end up in Detroit. There's a wide range of history that refer to it as the migrations.
Right.
Th
But we
that
know it was forced terrorism a lot of
I
times.
mean, the narrative is they sought better home, better housing,
Mhm.
better jobs,
Mhm.
better education because the schools in the South, and
Mhm.
all that is true. All that is true. That's not the entire story because it doesn't explain the family that left in pre-dawn hours. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Hoboed on the train that was passing through because he owed so much debt as a tenant farmer, as a sharecropper.
Mhm.
And sometimes the husband left looking for this work because Chicago Defender, Amsterdam News, Pittsburgh Courier, some of these northern newspapers were advertising, come on up here. It's the promised land. They literally used the
You
word
mean like
promised
they
land.
do about Detroit and New York with the billboards saying,
Yes,
"Come to Detroit for cheap
except
real
these
estate"?
except these were
Oh, they have billboards?
yes, they were doing that during gentrification. Yes, during the
Yes,
bankruptcy. Yes, they
yes,
had billboards come.
everywhere.
Yes, they
"Come
did.
Detroit, go to Detroit."
Yes, they did.
Yep.
Like
But
Lemony, right?
but we're talking about these were the Negro papers, the black papers of this
Right.
era, and they're in the north, and they were just saying these plants are opening up.
Mm,
Come to Detroit.
$5 a day
Come up
for
here. We got, it's work. You don't have to deal with that.
Like Brutal South.
Right. And uh, so that part of the story get washed out about how, and don't get me wrong, it was so bad that they began to enact laws in the South that you had to get a permit to recruit workers
Wow.
because they didn't want us to leave. And when you apply for a permit, it made you a target.
Of course, like going to vote.
No, no. So if you came from Chicago or Detroit and we was going down there and trying to recruit some people, because you sent black people and they sent American recruiters to go down there and just get workers. We need workers. And so they was going down there, but if you go to jail if you didn't apply for a permit because they wrote laws. You just can't go around here just because you just talk, have a conversation. Man, some work
Then
up
you
north.
going
You
to jail
going to
because you
jail.
applied for the permit
You
because
apply for a permit. Now you set yourself up for some
the
other mess because
Southern
now they
economy.
railroad you. They're
Right.
gonna railroad you now.
Right.
You at the coffee shop. Now they're gonna look for anything to nitpick and railroad you. They chasing you out of town because they didn't want us to leave for their cheap labor.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They needed us. You can't fancy yourself supreme unless it's somebody inferior to you.
But that goes back to what
Proximity.
you said about the lack of safety. Like there is no safe way to struggle for our liberation. Like, it goes back to what you said
No, ain't
earlier.
no innocent
There's no
activity.
innocent activity.
Ain't no innocent activity under this brutal, imperial settler colonial capitalist state.
So we got 30 minutes though, right? And wanted to ask the question, just your raw emotion, your raw thoughts, particularly around what's in the news related to the Memphis situation. There's a lot of different perspectives. 5 black officers, settler officers, brutally beats a black man, killing. I know a lot of the conversations. Why they ain't out protesting? What's going on? Blah blah blah.
Actually, it worked.
But yeah, I mean, this is and just wanted to give folks initial thoughts. I mean, today's show is what you saw as us just introducing ourselves. And I think our ability to we touched on some hot things, but just kind of zeroing in as we get ready to leave, give you people a taste of what will do to come in terms of once we structure it out more in terms of zero or what a topic would be. I don't mind going first if someone else like to.
I mean, I would just say it's a protracted struggle, and I think sometimes we get confused when certain moments happen in history, and we look for activation to look a certain way.
Right.
And I think, just as long as this struggle has been ongoing, so has resistance to these forces has been ongoing. And so, um, just because you're not seeing something in the media, the mass media or the news doesn't mean that there isn't movement. And also the people who ask the questions should be asking those questions of themselves. What then are you contributing to transforming the system?
Absolutely.
What are you looking for externally that you need to see a certain type of response? And if you're not seeing the response that you're looking for, then how are you perpetuating that response? And so, yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah.
For me initially, uh, was trying to unpack the layers.
Mhm.
I mean, any of us who reside in the ghetto, or we say nowadays the hood, which is a very oppressed community, a very oppressed area, which we don't control, but we think we do. We don't control nothing in there. So as a result, the police comes in as an occupying army, and I leave Kwasi to talk about the neocolonialism of that aspect. And many of us know of black officers beating, killing, but we had never seen, to our knowledge, something like 5, or I think they said it was a white officer.
Yeah, it was other officers. They
But
just weren't in the view of the camera.
right,
One of them was
right,
actually it was his body cam that was used in a lot of cases. You
okay,
saw his hand here and there, and you heard his voice.
right. So from a psychological standpoint, trying to wrap our heads around that, and then you see the immediate response. Either they got fired or suspended.
Brother got suspended
Yeah, I mean,
and before they were charged.
and this kind of falls in with a lot of our discussions in around the dynamics of race and how race is it plays different roles. Where what we see on the other hand, the white settler folks, they get all due process, and then if they do get it suspended, they're getting suspended with pay, et cetera, et cetera. You don't even know the names, you don't see the images, but with these guys, it was a
Right away.
totally different process, right? So for me, it was like a double injustice in there. The injustice of the young brother or the brother who was killed, but then you see the white settler or white hegemony laying, putting these black men out to dry as well. But in reality, they're part of the system, part of the problem. But that's leading to the confusion because we look at the officers as if they're why do they do that? They're supposed to do the right thing, but their loyalty, their interest is a different situation. So being able to deconstruct them as black men, but also as officers, which they saw themselves more than just black men.
Right. Oppression is what oppression does. The bottom line is law enforcement, to use that term, began as a repressive force against New African
Slavery.
people. And right, it began to repress, prevent escapes, prevent insurrections. You know, I mean, it was there. Its very beginnings was there. The armed deployment of armed settler men, aka white men, American men, because we are not Americans, though some of us consider, my brother say, half Americans, hyphenated Americans. But so that aspect confused us because we associate these kind of brutality or terrorism or murder, death of our people. We associate it with what we like to say is racist. That's what we like to say, and that's what we used to sing, but we forget that the system operates as a whole, and that with a class conscious, we recognize that there's a lot of other layers, and a lot of the layers can be seen when you have a broader perspective. Malcolm talked about that as well, about trying to see beyond your block, your immediate experience, and seeing the world and having a broader perspective. In this context, simultaneous to the brutal beating death of Tyree Nichols, we also see a couple things happen. We have Cop City, where this young Venezuelan activist was killed uh, in Georgia. You know, and they were occupying the forest to prevent, as a part of a protest to raise awareness around the buildup of Cop City. That was the name. That's the name. That's
Literally Cop City.
literally Cop City is this massive. Supposed to be this area of the forest supposed to be conserved. It was actually in law conserved by law in Atlanta law, and you had lobbyist forces. Now it's being funded by a corporately funded foundation, the police foundation, which is like I say, we go for okey doke all the time. After the George Floyd protest, which reached populations around the globe, in the height in the midst of a pandemic, people came out and protested, and with that came a lot of corporate piggybacking. And you had all this marketing campaigning from all these major corporations, Black Lives Matter. They start giving out grants for doing programs to fund this and fund that. But what people didn't know about was that they were also funding the same police we was protesting.
Right.
Cop City is a privately funded, corporate funded entity. We're talking about a training center, not just for Atlanta police. This is supposed to be a training center that's supposed to be high tech at a level where cops can come in and get elite training in law enforcement. But what does it say about a society that needs this many internal cops? It's one thing when you got a society, you got an army to protect the borders from encroachment from the outside. It's an entirely different thing to say this is a civil society when you got police, in military apparel. They're rolling up in tanks and special equipment. When people protesting, when this society says in their own Declaration of Independence and Constitution about the right to be able to, stand up against, even if your own government do something, but they bring out the tanks against these very people.
Yeah, it's supposed to be your responsibility.
So, but in addition to Cop City, simultaneously, we have something happening right here in our own backyard, here in Michigan. Camp Grayling, which is what you call that? You call them National Reserve, uh, troops, military troops, reserve troops. Camp Grayling is the largest training base in this country for the National Reserve. I forget how many. It's like 250 square. It takes up 250 square miles of forest up north. They're trying to expand Camp Grayling by another 250,000 square miles. The people up there, which is probably a very conservative population, are pushing back because they love the land. They love they love nature, and it's a lot. But this is supposed to be for military training, international for training forces, repressive forces in other countries. Imagine,
Real.
right? I mean, where Israel actually provide training
For our
for people
US
here
law
because they have
enforcement,
extremely advanced repressive techniques and technologies, and they actually do a lot of training to the United States. Inside the United States, I mean,
So it goes
they
goes back.
specialize in that.
That kind of
Yep.
goes back to your international point, right?
I mean, yeah, we
But
just
the
have to see
other
the big
side,
picture. It's about really trying our very best. We can't
Which is why the
see it
US
all.
opts out of so many of those.
you
But
said that again.
That's why the US opts out of so many of those, like UNESCO agreements, international treaties, and different
so
things
they
to
don't have to
protect
live
human
up to those
rights.
standards.
Hmm.
And so it's trying to
Slick
see the big
bastards.
picture. No, we really do have to try to see the big picture the best we can. We can't do everything that's happening all at the same time, especially if you're going to work every day and you're trying to take care of your families, trying to do your due diligence in your community, whatever. We can't know everything, but we also need reliable outlets to be able to share the information that we can trust because you can't trust everything that's floating out here. People flam all over the place, even within the struggle. People
Yeah.
sponsored by
I will say
so and
that's one
so.
reason why that is one thing I do migrate to, that Jimmy and Grace, with all time, what time is the world? Like what time it is on the clock of the world should be defining how we engage in movement, theology, or political education, because
What is
chances are
oh,
whatever is happening
time out.
happening here,
What's political education?
I mean, it's the ways that we learn about a society, um, whether it be through study, whether it be through, or the personal is political, how we apply, how we experience the world through history, historical analysis, reading, and those things, different mechanisms for growing and developing our critical thinking around movement. And so, what time is on the clock of the world, like I used to resist that, like, what the hell does that mean? But now, like, I want to know, like, how does this apply to what's happening globally, to the best of my ability? Like you said,
Right.
there's no way we're gonna know everything, but nothing's new under the sun. So we should be looking
And it's
to seek.
patterns.
Right.
And I think
There are patterns that we can
Yeah.
follow from one place to another that can help broaden the way we understand things.
but to see those patterns and themes, we have to ask questions.
Right.
And part of what time of the clock on the world is a direct question. And the question makes you to look inside yourself because we live in a country that teaches people what to think instead of how to think, right?
We're moving rapidly towards it's already a fascist country. I mean, in my estimation, but
It's always
it's
been that. It's not.
right.
It hasn't
I'm
changed.
just saying, but it's rapidly it's increasing. It's fashion in Missouri. Just a few days ago, they just you got young people. It's legal for young people open carry. And that includes whatever is legal. You know what I'm saying? They can open carry, and they were trying to pass legislation to kind of curtail youth. We talking about minors, not an 18-year-old. We talking about minors,
Right.
uh, and it's legal
And with
to
digital
carry.
technology, they're creating these online.
But I think to your point is making the separation of there's the state, right, and how they operate in this type of information that they're doing their job. And on the other hand, us internally, we're contributing to the confusion with so much oversaturation of information, of talking heads. Like all of us came with a book. I mean, there folks are reading, but why are you trying to present this
What is your
information?
goal? What is
Right,
your objective? What is the conversation about?
right, exactly.
They've mastered the hiding the contradiction, and it hasn't challenged us in a systemic way yet, in my opinion, to sharpen our analysis based on the contradictions that we are facing.
We don't want to hear it. A lot of us, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart, is that a lot of us we don't want the raw truth because
Ignorance is bliss.
and it brings a lot of responsibility, and we ain't ready for that.
Yeah.
And I try to help people understand that knowing something don't necessarily mean that you have to jump into an organization. That would be beautiful. It would be nice if we had, many hands make for light work. But We
But it's
can't have.
painful to know.
I mean,
It is painful
It
to
is.
know.
It can upset. It can upset this rosy conception of the world. This
so when did that? Two questions. When do you think that transition occurred of not wanting to know that brutal truth that pushed us to respond the way we did? And the second question along with that is, when did it occur that we no longer described our struggle as like a freedom struggle? Now it's like it's a
well,
Well,
it ain't even that. We say
a lot of
liberation,
leaders.
freedom,
I'm,
in
I,
abstract terms.
I,
They,
whether,
for one,
what
but
I'm
they can
saying,
mean anything to anybody in that sense. Freedom.
I think a lot of leaders were assassinated,
I'm
and
asking,
that had a tremendous shift on a kind of a hive mind that was happening amongst our people, where you had the lumpen, you had even some of the more middle class black people who were willing to do stuff like boycott buses or do like these more mass struggle type things. And I think not seeing repercussions of having a Malcolm X murder, having a George Jackson murder, having a Martin Luther King
It's
murder, having a
demoralizing.
yeah,
started
Sada Shakur,
incarcerated.
yeah, that has a psychological impact.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks are fearful for legitimate reasons. Are fearful of making those types of sacrifices to engage with the movement.
So one of your favorite authors, favorite book, Ice Paper.
Not so. Not so.
She talks a little bit about that in terms of that internal trauma that was born out of depression.
It's always been there. It's always been there. Well, let me frame it a slightly different way.
Right.
One of the things that Imari Obadeli kind of highlighted that helped me, saying find where I wanted to stand ideologically. You pointed out there was three historically uh, uh, trend or tendencies within our struggle from the beginning to now. They continue to exist. Those three general tendencies was there was always some people that wanted to make this country live up to its potential
Right.
and be integrated as
Evolve
full citizens with unabridged rights and treated equal with everybody here. That tendency has always been there. I mean, you can go all the way back to Chris Rosatic, what I'm
Right.
saying, falling for George Washington, falling on the sword. But you also had a tendency, going back to say people like Paul Kufi and them who, they wanted to go back to the motherland. They would say, I want to go back home. And there was some, because we had many generations born here, that said,
We have a culture.
we want land here.
Yeah.
And not only that, we want
built
the
this.
land that we were most instrumental in developing, which was historically known as the Black Belt. They said, I want the land where my blood, my sweat, my tears help fertilize the soil, where we buried for 246 years continuously ancestors during that period of colonial bondage. That's another one of those nomenclature terms that I would use to refer to slavery. I call it colonial bondage because we are born as a nation, in the belly of the beast. And we were born, when the English and the Irish and the Germans and the Slavs were becoming Americans from their different ethnicities and being born again in the West on this North American continent as Americans, simultaneous and side by side with them, we were in the fields in the South, from Igbo, Hausa, Fulani, on and so on and so forth. We were becoming a new kind of African. We really discovered our uniqueness in the halls of a slave ship. Because when we keep in mind that when we talk about African culture, we didn't all speak the same language.
Right.
And all those people didn't come from one tribe on those boats. Those people, they was herded into those castles, those dungeons on the coast. Some of them were coming from different areas. They were little coming in at a time until they got a boatload of them together. And they all brought different cultures. They was in them halls of those ships, looking around like literally we all in the same boat. And they began to realize that's when Sterling Stuckley talked about how we began to cross those cultural lines and seeing ourselves as one because we were one. We didn't see ourselves as African prior to that because we never had this continental view of ourselves. My tribe is my they use the modern term. We were set tripping. You know what I'm saying? I'm Ashanti. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we is. You ain't Ashanti.
Zulu.
Right. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so we were set tripping, but that was the natural part of evolution of humanity. People were like that all over the world. So it's nothing unique to Africa. But colonialism tended to halt that period, and we got stuck in that phase. Colonialism preserved those divisions because it benefited colonialism to have those divisions. Kept the chief, he get a few little gifts, a little trinkets and things like that, and they even act like they was paying him respect, but they needed him to keep his tribe in line. And hence we still got a form of modern tribalism on the continent of Africa. We talk about Pan-Africanism. We don't even, we struggling with the, tribal conflicts in these countries where borders were built by colonial powers. So we really want, when I say colonial bondage, referring to slavery, that we were a nation that was colonized. Enslavement is one way of referring to it, but colonial bondage speaks directly to the nation formation aspect of it. And we have to be clear that if we are a nation and we are colonizers, we like to use that word. That's a very popular term. That we are colonized. Then how do you liberate that nation? You decolonize it. We ain't talking about decolonizing your mind, because if your mind is decolonized, you want your body decolonized, right? And if not, then you ain't fully, your mind ain't even decolonized.
Is that your mind, your
Free.
ass will follow?
It ain't happened yet. It ain't happened yet.
So-
It ain't happened yet. Some of us don't aspire that far. And I like to say that if your inspiration, if the history don't inspire you to aspire more, then what is it? What is the benefit of it? To feel good?
But something that we have, and I love this, and I think we in another show we got to dig a lot deeper into what you said about, like, we're all in the same boat, like literally, like looking around and saying like we're literally in the same boat, and why there is the resistance to considering us all a monolith, right? And like what contradictions are heightened when there's that resistance from some of us, and then
Those
there's
are
this
class
push
differences.
for yeah.
So-
So I think a deepening on that is going to be long overdue.
So I say Jet magazine, Ebony magazine, they began to highlight the finest, the best, the finest Negroes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
The black
Negro,
aesthetic, the black aesthetics.
you know what I'm saying? They began to shape this, and it didn't start with
They
them.
were building with the
And-
talented
but they
narrative.
right, and they were building on that, and we wanted to see what you call representation. So we ate it up. We wanted to see
some of us make it.
Yes,
right?
it was inspiration. It played an inspirational role, but it was still class based and class rooted, and it began to also create individualism among us.
It directed us into assimilation. So today been a great show, phenomenal. Any things you guys want to share? I know today was getting organic. We covered a lot, man.
We got Black Liberation Mondays returning again this Monday.
Yes.
Over at Mama Cool Community House.
Starting at 7. I'll be the host. Film we will be watching is Spook Who Sat by the Door. Our ultimate goal is to have Black Liberation Monday run from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Just a dope opportunity for Black folks to just come and just experience ourselves. It's kind of what we're doing here. A lot of pop-up events. We're still working out the kinks, so just bear with us, getting some other folks involved. But no, that's our vision, and just kind of having that series running throughout until we don't want to do it no more.
That's right.
Just in general, man. Just anything closing, how you felt, anything missed that you wanted to say you didn't say. I know
it's a whole lot. I mean, we touched on so much that we didn't expand on, but it's a good thing because maybe some of the audience hit them comments and let us know what about such and such. Y'all say y'all's gonna get back on that and bring that.
Yeah, I would say that too. I love to see what the feedback is, and maybe in some future shows we can even engage with the audience more. But I think that like, give us comments. What do y'all want to see us talk about? What do y'all want to see us dig into? And
push
and
back
I
against
think this
it.
was good.
Push
Yes.
Look, so I mean, when people talk about like power to the people or people show, we definitely want to be that. So you have the opportunity to help us shape what this is about. None of us has no desire to be a talking head. We have some ideas, but again, our ideas are rooted in people. Our ideas are liberated, centered. So that's why we can humbly ask that and mean that from the bottom of our hearts.
Right. Because when we stop learning, we're no longer here.
That's right. With that, thank you for tuning in to ReBuild the Win, Voices from the Grassroots, first episode. Detroit is different. You know, this is the platform, y'all.
Yeah.
Check us out. Rebuild to win.
Detroit is
Build to
absolutely
win.
different.
Yes. That was fun.
It was.